Hi folks, my name is P. Rocky and I'm going to tell you about a Grizzly G0768 machine lathe that I got recently. It's a nice little machine. It's not a mini. It has an 8-inch swing and 20 inches between centers. It makes it big enough and heavy enough to do some serious work, but yet it's movable, and that's why I wanted a machine like this. It's a nice little machine. It had some strengths and some weaknesses, and I'm going to talk to you about those things. You can see it has a digital readout, speed readout, spindle speed. It doesn't have a quick change, which I wish it did, but it has everything else that could be automated or done mechanically without swapping gears is done. You still have to swap gears to do any serious threading on it. One of the things you have to get used to on a lathe like this, if you're used to a bigger one, is that the hand wheels are small. This one is awkward to do with my right hand. I have to do it with my left hand. And the other thing that you have to get used to, and it's really pretty challenging, is that to get the rigidity you need with a machine like this, you have to have the gibs extra tight. I'm used to working with a Logan lathe, a much heavier machine. It weighed probably about 800 or 900 pounds. And with that machine, the weight of the gibs could be quite loose, the carriage could be quite loose. Everything was so heavy that it didn't matter. So I was pretty spoiled by that machine. Nonetheless, when you tighten everything down on this, it seems to do pretty good work. One of the problems the machine has, its low-speed torque is not outstanding. It has a brush motor in it. It's it has to run on 15 amps, so it's limited. You don't run into the problem often unless you're actually trying to run the spindle at a very low speed and take a heavy bite. If you were to buy a similar machine from Little Machine Shop, they didn't have one at anything like a comparable price when I bought this, or I would have bought it from them. They have one with a brushless motor, and motors of that sort develop full torque at low RPM. So if I had $500 more at my disposal, I would have bought it from them. Not only that, but the service I get from them is always sensational. Problems with this machine. The first problem I will mention is that a fellow named Bob N. covered this machine on YouTube, and he found that there was a huge amount of grit in the gibs and ways of the cross slide and the compound. And when I took this machine apart, I found the same thing. Lots of grit and, well, it was actually grinding compound. Now, he was mystified as to why it was there. I'm not mystified as to why it's there, because as a gunsmith, I know when you fit the slide to a frame on an automatic, the way you fit it is by using grinding compound. You work it back and forth until it slides nice and smooth. And then you wash it out with solvent. These guys did not wash anything out from solvent, so that's why it was full of grime. If you're going to buy a Chinese-made machine from anybody but LMS, Little Machine Shop, I suggest you take everything apart and wash it out. Before I go on, there's another little thing I want to tell you about. This is a rolling cabinet that I got from eBay, and it's a Seville 4-drawer rolling cabinet. It is built like a brick, you know what. It was not expensive. It was more expensive than the $150 jobbies that you usually get. And here's this is the posting for it. You can see it cost me $223. You can get it on Amazon for about $20 more. This cabinet has genuine roller slides on all the drawers, so the drawers slide out on rollers. It also has 5-inch or maybe 6-inch casters, enormous casters, so it rolls on a dirty concrete floor effortlessly. If you went to buy the casters right now, just the casters right now, it costs you $75 or $80. It has 2 locking casters, so I'm very pleased with it. The other thing it has that's not relevant for my purposes is a 1-inch thick maple glued up butcher block on the top. It's just a gorgeous thing. I wish I had bought others of these rather than the ones I've got instead. Now, the other major issue with this and most similar lathes that I've seen is that the tool post that comes with it, which they call an indexing four-way tool post, is pretty crude. It does index. These bolts on here didn't come with it. I've added a longer stud here, and therefore I have to take up the space so I can show it to you. So these are my nuts. But when you turn this, it has an indexing feature that lets you turn it in only one direction. It serves absolutely no purpose. You can lock it down between positions, but then what's the purpose of the indexing? And here, if I lock it down over here, I'm going to show you the real problem. The cutter is almost a quarter of an inch below the center line of the lathe. So, what are we supposed to do about that? The user guide, which is otherwise quite commendable for this machine, simply tells you, I'm going to get it out and show it to you. This is the user guide. Quite a robust document. As a technical writer myself, I think they did an excellent job of it. It's written in real English. You can really understand it, and all the points are covered pretty nicely, except for this one issue. What do you do about getting the cutter up to the center line of the lathe? And they say in one sentence, you have to shim it up. Well, what does that mean? That means you're going to stand there and cut out pieces of brass and aluminum or steel, or maybe go to Harbor Freight and buy yourself a cheapo set of feeler gauges and take it apart and stick them in there. It makes setting the cutter into a big project that it shouldn't be otherwise. So the obvious solution to that, and one I've always been aware of, that I used on my Logan lathe, was an Aloris type quick change tool post. So I'm a big fan of those. I decided to call Grizzly up and say, what kind of a quick change tool post you got for this machine? And the salespeople didn't have a clue. They said, call tech support. I called tech support and asked them what they got, and the guy said, I haven't got a clue. They had an AXA tool post for their bigger machines. AXA refers to a machine bigger than 9-inch. This machine has an 8-inch swing, so obviously you need something that would possibly fit on a mini lathe, but you want something more robust than that. So as it turns out, Little Machine Shop, as usual, had exactly the right part for me. They have an OXA style quick change tool post, and here's the catalog, and on the right you can see that it's a 3048 quick change tool post for 8 to 9-inch lathes, and that's what I got. And you can also see on this side of the page, by the way, that was $134.95, pretty cheap. Comes with 5 interchangeable tool holders, and it works like a champ. Here on this side of the page, they have one for $99. It comes with 4 interchangeable tool holders. It's made out of aluminum. Listen, if Little Machine Shop sells it, Chris Wood over there knows what he's doing. He wouldn't sell it if it didn't work. I just preferred the steel one. As far as how many holders you need, well, I got 5 holders. One of them is for a boring bar, which I'll probably never use because boring bars these days are built onto a bit that is held in a regular tool holder. So actually, although I held out for 5 tool holders, I don't think it made any difference in the end. So let me tell you what's underneath this indexing tool holder that comes here. I'm going to take it off. I'm going to take this out. I had to use this tool holder to make the stud that's in here now. So I actually got to spend half an hour goofing around with shims to get it to work. Now, underneath this tool post You can't see it because it's on the other side of the machine. There is an indexing pin. In fact, I'm going to take this camera off of here and show you that indexing pin. It shouldn't be too painful to do that. So you can see it sticking up over there. It's just a beveled pin sticking up out of the compound with a spring under it. And the first thing you do, of course, is to take that out. Over here, you see a boss, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see that. And the purpose of that boss is to make the slide thicker, the compound thicker, so that it holds this stud securely, which is pressed into place. The slide is only about 5 or 6 millimeters thick. So if you were to go ahead and try to press that stud in at that thickness, it might fail to hold, or might perhaps even damage the slide. Here is the original stud. The diameter of the head is 13 millimeters, and the thickness of the head is about 3 1/4 millimeters. And it's made, aside from the boss at the top of it, it's made out of an M10 bolt. So I wasn't sure how to go about setting this up. I emailed Chris Wood, the proprietor over at LMS. I said, "What do you suggest?" And he suggested going to the store and buying a 3 1/2 inch long M10 bolt and turning the head down to fit into that into the recess there, into the socket. So I took the slide off. I'll show you how I did that in a minute. And I pressed out the old head. I knocked it out with a hammer. When you do that, you put a nut on top of this. This is a standard machinist practice. And you hit it with a brass hammer. That way you're not going to damage the threads. And the original stud comes right out. Okay? And now I'm going to start taking this apart and show you how it works. So I'm going to stop the camera for a moment and get ready to... Okay, we're going to take the slide off now. First thing I'm going to do is take this end piece off, which releases the lead screw. This slide has no saddle. It's held together just as you see it by the end piece. And you'll find that most of these inexpensive Chinese lathes are built very similarly and come with exactly the same rather useless tool post. Okay? And the next thing we're going to do is loosen up the gibs. Now the whole thing will come apart very easily. I'm holding the gib in place with my hand. So here's what you got. Let's put this where you can see it. You can see the stud that I put in, 3 1/2 inch stud. You can see the hole where the indexing spring and pin were. You can also see the boss on the compound. And that boss is almost 1/4 of an inch high, probably 5 or 6 millimeters. And that means when you put any other tool post on top of it that's not designed for that, unlike the one that came with it, you have to figure out how to support it, because that boss gets in the way. On the bottom of the slide, you can see the bottom of the stud, which, as I said, I measured it. It was 13 inches in diameter, and 13 millimeters in diameter, and 3 millimeters thick. Okay, so now I'm going to stop for a second and put this back together and show you how the LMS tool post goes on there. Okay, the slide is back on and adjusted, so now we can resume. And while I'm putting the tool post on it, I just want to commend Chris at LMS, who was very generous with his time and experience. This machine is not made by Stig, who makes most of the stuff he sells. He didn't know who made it. In fact, Grizzly didn't know who made it when I called them up. I guess there are a lot of companies over there making similar machines. He exchanged emails with me, probably more than a dozen emails, and he always answered me within an hour or so. It was just amazing how attentive he was. He helped me to pick out the right tool post to put on there and made some suggestions about how to go about doing it. Now, the solution that I found that worked for me, how do we cover this boss to put a tool post on? Well, guess what? Standard 3/4 inch washers, 2 of them from Home Depot. And they happen to be flat enough without even lapping them. I could lap them if I needed to. I could have on a glass pane with some 320 sandpaper. It wasn't necessary. They fit on here with only a little bit of slop, and they raise the tool post just above the boss perfectly. So now, when I put the tool post on, it goes on perfectly. Now, there's no indexing baloney on this. It's just a quick change, so you can move things around to suit yourself. And we're going to put that on. Tighten it a little bit. And let's throw a bit in there just to see what it's going to look like. So the bit's tightened down with these set screws easily. I'll tighten one of them to hold it in place. And now you can see that the height of the cutter is now right on the center line. And if I want to change the height, you change it with this screw, right, with this nut right here. That way, when you take the holder off and put it back on, it goes on in exactly the same place every time. What could be cooler than that? It has, and this is something I didn't know, and maybe you don't know it either. This tool post holder has 2 positions, and I found that by selecting this position, I was able to put the control lever where I wanted it. When I first put it on, the control lever was facing the chuck, which was rather annoying, and putting it on like this solved the problem. I've had no problem whatever with the washers. They seem to be flat enough to make a perfectly secure base. If I wanted to be fancy, I guess I could turn my own washers and make them more accurate than this, but it would be more of an aesthetic issue than a practical one, because frankly, this works absolutely perfectly. So again, I don't know of any small lathes that come with an Aloris type quick change tool post, so whatever you buy, you're going to wind up having to adapt one. And I found that this stud arrangement that's on this lathe is pretty common for most of them. Most of them do not come with a saddle. They come with a pressed-in tool post stud, just like this one. So you can probably follow these directions to come up with your own. Again, my stud I bought was a 3.5 inch bolt, an M10, and the cap was turned down. It was a standard hex bolt. I turned the cap down to 13 millimeters in diameter and 3 millimeters thick, and it popped right in without any problem, and I just shimmed it. And the rest was duck soup. I hope that helps you out. I hope you find it informative. And if I come up with any other great ideas, I'll run them by you.